Hi friends, a disturbing question is emerging from Maharashtra, not merely about conversion but about freedom of conscience itself. From August 28, 2026, Maharashtra's new Freedom of Religion Act is scheduled to come into force. The law is presented as a measure against forced, fraudulent, coercive, or induced religious conversion. No civilized society should defend coercion, fraud, or threats in matters of faith. If somebody is genuinely forced to change religion, the law should protect that person. But the question before India is much larger. What happens when a law intended to prevent forced conversion creates an atmosphere in which ordinary religious worship itself begins to look suspicious? That question is no longer theoretical. Reports from Mumbai and the surrounding metropolitan region say that some Christian congregations in Vasai, Virar, Mira, Bayandar, Palghar, and Thane have begun asking worshippers to sign declaration stating that they attend prayer meetings voluntarily and without pressure, inducement, threat, or coercion. Some churches have reportedly introduced photographs and identity details as part of these precautions. Think about what this means. For generations, a person could walk into a place of worship because he or she wanted to pray. Now, in some places, that person feels compelled to produce evidence that the decision was voluntarily. A prayer meeting begins to resemble a courtroom. A worshipper begins to resemble an accused person. And religious freedom begins to feel like a privilege that must be documented. This should concern every Indian, not only Christians. The constitution begins with the individual. India's constitutional vision did not begin with the question, which religion does the majority follow? It begins with the dignity and liberty of the individual. Article 25 guarantees freedom of conscience and the right to profess, practice, and propagate religion subject to constitutional limitations. Article 26 protects the right of religious denominations to manage their religious affairs subject to public order, morality, and health. The Constitution, therefore, does not say you may believe provided the majority approves. It says in substance that conscience belongs to the individual. That principle protects the Hindu who chooses Hinduism, the Muslim who chooses Islam, the Christian who chooses Christianity, the Sikh who chooses Sikhism, and the person who chooses another faith or no faiths. The freedom to reject a religion is inseparable from the freedom to embrace one. If a citizen is free to say no to Christianity, that citizen must also be free to say yes to Christianity. That is not a Christian privilege. That is a constitutional freedom, sir. But who becomes the target? It is where the debate becomes uncomfortable. A law may be formally worded in religiously neutral language while its social consequences can fall disproportionately upon particular communities. Christians are not the only people who should be concerned. Muslims, Dalits, Adivasis, tribal communities, interfaith couples of other vulnerable citizens should also watch carefully whenever the state begins entering deeply into questions of personal conscience. The law reportedly introduces stringent provisions concerning alleged unlawful conversion and creates special consequences where vulnerable categories are involved. The very communities that have historically experienced social exclusion, caste, discrimination, and economic vulnerability therefore deserve protection from both exploitation and intimidation. A Dalit or tribal person should never be treated as incapable of making an independent religious decision merely because he or she belongs to a marginalized community. That is itself a dangerous form of paternalism. A poor person has a conscience. A tribal person has a conscience, sir. A Dalit has a conscience. A woman has a conscience. A marginalized citizen has a conscience. Poverty does not cancel free will. Caste does not cancel free will. Tribal identity does not cancel free will. And economic vulnerability must never become an excuse to deny an adult the right to make personal choices. protect people from coercion, but do not criminalize choice. There is a profound difference between these two proportions. Nobody should be forced to change religion, and nobody should be allowed to choose another religion. The first is principle of freedom. The second is a principle of control. A state has a legitimate interest in preventing genuine coercion, fraud, and threats. But the test must be evidence of unlawful conduct, not the mere existence of Christian prayer, preaching, humanitarian service, or voluntary religious choice. Otherwise, a law designed to protect conscience can become an instrument that intimidates conscience. Why are churches installing cameras? A report says some churches have increased security and CCTV surveillances following disruptions of prayer meetings. The Indian Express reported 9 FIR connected to 5 disruptions of prayer meetings between April and July in the Mumbai metropolitan region. This is an extraordinary development. A church should be thinking about worship. You should not have to think first about whether somebody will enter the prayer hall, interrupt the service, accuse the congregation of conversion, call the police, and turn worshippers into witnesses. And if churches begin collecting declarations simply because they fear future allegations, that tells us something about the psychological climate surrounding the law. Even before implementation, the law's shadow is already affecting behavior. That should make Democrats pause. Is this protection or political threats? This is where citizens have every right to ask difficult questions. What measurable social problem will these extraordinary restrictions solve? Will they eliminate poverty? Will they create employment? Will they improve government schools? Will they provide better health care? Will they end caste discrimination? Will they improve the lives of India's tribal communities? Will they reduce unemployment? Will they solve agrarian distress? Will they strengthen social harmony? If not, why is religious conversion repeatedly placed at the center of political attention? It is legitimate for citizens to ask whether such politics can divert public attention from more difficult questions of governance. That does not prove that the law was enacted solely. That does not prove that the law was enacted solely for political diversion. But it does make political scrutiny necessary. Democracy demands that governments answer not only what are you prohibiting, but also what public good are you actually producing. The Christian answer is not fear. Christians should not respond to this moment by becoming defensive or hostile. They should respond with constitutional confidence. Christian mission is rooted in the conviction that every human being is created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, Christian ministry must never be based on coercion. Every human being is to seek truth, ask questions, worship, challenge religious affiliation, remain in their faith, or reject religion altogether. Faith that requires force is not faith. Conversion through coercion is not conversion. But conversion through genuine conviction cannot be called coercion simply because someone disliked the choice. That distinction must never be lost. India must not become a country of religious suspicion. The danger is not simply what happens inside a church. The deeper danger is what happens inside the mind of a nation. When citizens begin asking, can I attend this prayer meeting? Can I speak to that pastor? Can I receive help from that institution? Can I marry someone from another faith? Will somebody complain against me? Will the police investigate my religious choice? Then freedom has already begun to shrink psychologically even before a court determines whether a particular action was unlawful. A democracy cannot survive on fear. India cannot become a country where religious minorities continually have to prove their innocence and marginalized citizens have to prove that their choice are genuinely their own. Stand together, not as Christians, Muslims, Hindus, or Dalits, but as citizens. This is the crucial moment. The answer is not Christian versus Hindu. It is not Muslim versus Hindu. It is not majority versus minority. The real question is constitution versus majoritarian suspicion, freedom versus fear, citizen versus communal polarization. Every Hindu who believes in constitutional democracy should stand with the Christian whose freedom of conscience is threatened. Every Muslim should stand with the Dalits. Every Christian should stand with the tribal citizens. Every Dalit should stand with the Muslim. Every Adivasi should stand with the Christian. Because constitutional rights are not minority property. Today the victim may be a Christian. Tomorrow it may be someone else. The constitution belongs to all of us. And therefore the message must be equally clear. Protect people from forced conversion, but do not manufacture forced conformity. Stop coercion, but do not criminalize conscience. Fight fraud, but do not turn minorities into suspects. India does not need more religious fear. India needs more constitutional courage. And those who genuinely love this nation must stand together, not to defend one religion against another, but to defend the constitutional promise that makes India worth defending in the first place. I hope that you all will understand it and will let us stand together for build the nation in the right way. Thank you very much.